Okay, let's get started. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yo Antaha Pravishya Mama Vacha Imam Prashuptam Sanjeevayati Akhila Shakti Daraswadamna. अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So, good evening, everyone. Let's get directly into the crux of what we are planning to discuss today. So, let me get my slideshow on. Okay, so we have covered quite a lot of ground in this particular adhyaya. We are in the second adhyaya. We are in the Pratamavalli, and the ones that are that are highlighted in green box and purple box. We have done those verses, and we got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 verses to do to complete the Pratama Valli or Dvitiya Adhyaya of Katha Upanishad. So as you know, we are currently placed in the we are placed in the third boon of Nachiketa, where Nachiketa wants to know about this Brahman, the supreme being, what is the position of the souls in moksha, and so on. So if you had not realized so far, the key idea here really is that Nachiketa wanting to know about what is this Brahman, what is this Paramatma, what is this Bhagavan, all these concepts that are there in our day-to-day worship and in the day-to-day practice of the Sanatana Dharma. We are all very familiar with these ideas, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and so on. And how does it all fit in? What are these definitions? Who are these people? What are their natures? What do they do? This is what Nachiketa has been asking Yama for the past several months, at least in this forum. So what did we do last week? Last week we had a very beautiful verse. We closed that verse last week. Aranyo nihito jataveda garbhaiva subruto garbhinibihi dive dive idyo jagrutmadbihi havishmadbihi manushyebihi agnihi etadvaitat. So in this verse, Yama was talking about this aranyo nihito, how a guru and sishya, they churn with their sticks called the Vedas, and they churn and a fire comes out, which is the knowledge of the Supreme. And how that knowledge of the Supreme and that Supreme is known as Agni. And we did a lot of stuff about who this Agni is. Agni Shabdo Ayam Agre Eva Abhipujyatam Agrayatvam Agranetrutam Attim Anganga Netrutam. As a definition of Agni and the etymology of Agni, we spent quite a lot of time talking about this. Okay, so that was the last verse. Dive dive idyaha jagruvatbihi havishmatbihi manushyebihi agnihi. So as soon as Yama is talking to Nachiketa about Agni and fire sacrifice, and fire is quite a big deal in Vedic religion, and so is it a big deal in various other philosophies, as you know, where fire plays a very important role. And as we discussed last time, in Sanatana Dharma, we do a lot of havan, we do a lot of fire worship, we do a lot of fire sacrifice in our prayers when we go to the temple or when we do any functions at home, we do this. So Yama is telling us, when you look at the fire, have a different perspective on this, not as a material fire, but Agni Narayana. So have a slightly different perspective when you worship this Agni. And we understood what the Agni Sukta of Rig Veda was all about last week. So as soon as Yama has spoken about the fire that we see on earth, Yama now takes us to another very common and a very important example for us to do our philosophical understanding and also to understand who the Supreme Brahman is. So he says, yes, on the ground, when you see fire, you can think about the Supreme who is there inside the fire, but also every day of your life, every day in the morning when you wake up, the sun comes out. So when the sun comes out, have a view there. When you look at the sun, just don't look at the sun Of course, you don't look at the sun because it spoils your retina, but when you at least are aware that the sun is out, think about in what perspective you need to understand this sun. Yeah. Yatashta udeti suryaha astam yatra cha gacchati tam devaha sarve arpitaha tadu na atyeti kashtana etadvai tad. So that is the mantra there that very beautifully he puts. Yatashta udeti suryaha astam yatra gacchati. Okay. So here Yama is asking us through Nachiketa to think about this problem. Every day in the morning, the sun rises, and every day in the evening, the sun sets. Yatashcha udeti suryaha astam yatra cha gacchati. So udeti means sunrise. Astam means sunset. Yeah. So the sunrise and sunset, that happens every day of our life. In fact, the more the sunrises and sunset that we see, the more aged we get, the more closer we are approaching to death, the more sunrises and sunsets that we see. But do we look at the sunrise and sunset from a very philosophical perspective? Are we doing that in our lives? So this is something that Yama is wanting us to think about. And when he does that, he is also giving us some deeper philosophical understanding of the problem. Okay, so I got these kind of ideas here that I put a lot of stuff here. I don't want to spend a lot of time in this astronomy, astrophysics, that kind of business, because even I don't understand it fully. So sunrise and sunset. So when I did a bit of a research on this, what is clear is there are some equations that are out there based on the angle of the earth and the rotation. You can actually predict every day for the next century, perhaps, you could predict what time is the sunrise and what time is the sunset. Even, for example, even when you go to BBC weather, I think you can actually understand what time is the sunset in the UK and what time is the sunrise in the UK. With certain mathematical equations, you can work it out. So that mathematical equations, I've given it at the bottom panel here. For those of you with that kind of a physics kind of bent of mind, you can do your calculation. But what I'm trying to tell here is this is exact science, and it is very precise as to what time the sun rises, what time the sun sets. So Yama is asked, that is the question that Yama is asking. Yeah, we all know sunrises and sunsets, but Yama wants you to ask the bigger question. Why, how, under whose control the sunrise and the sunset happens? Okay, so that's a primary question. Of course, we don't ask that question. We just say, oh, it's a beautiful day, and that's it, and we get on with our daily business. But we don't ask this question, but Yama wants us to ask this question. Okay, so I have put this question mark here just to open up for today's discussion, and I hope this will be a lively discussion. And I put this one: why do all objects in the universe rotate and revolve? How did this all begin? Is this a random event or tightly regulated under strict laws? Who made those laws? So those are all the questions that we need to be asking here. So I want to open up for the first question. Why do all objects in the universe rotate? Earth, for example, rotates on its own axis in this figure. And I also understood recently that the sun also rotates on its own axis. And not only the sun, this whole Milky Way is also rotating. This whole, various suns, they are also rotating. I believe there is a black hole in the middle of the galaxy. And every guy is rotating around either itself or it's going around something else. So does anybody know why this is happening? Why does the earth revolve? This is a GCSE question. So if anybody wants to take open up for discussion, why does this happen? Why does the earth revolve? Why can't it just stay put? Who wants to take that question?
Is it the magnetic field, the north and the south poles, and the tilt?
Yes.
Causes, because of the way the electromagnetic flow, they then cause the Earth to rotate around its axis.
Okay, thanks, Ajit. Thanks for that perspective. Anybody else has got any views on this one? Because I honestly, I had no clue about this until I was thinking about this problem. So Ajit has got part of it, interestingly, right? So I think it is believed that this whole, all, not only the earth rotates, all heavenly objects, all objects in the universe are revolving around themselves. This is like a top that somehow, as you know, when you put around the rope and then you release the rope and the top then goes and then it keeps on spinning. It spins as long as there is that momentum or whatever it's called, and it keeps on spinning. And one view there is everything is revolving because this is reminiscent of what happened in the Big Bang. And then after the Big Bang, there was this big explosion, and then everything, was moving around, and they all then joined together and they continue to move around, moving around. And that is how that rotation and the revolution happened is one theory, that it all started from the Big Bang. Okay, it is all the reminiscent of the Big Bang. So the next question, of course, magnetic fields play a role in that. Thanks, Ajit. So the next question is this a random event or a tightly regulated under strict laws? Okay, why is it that the sun should rise on this particular time, and why is it that it should set on this time? Why is it that these fellows are revolving around and everybody revolves around a particular speed? Suns revolves around a particular speed and it goes around the galaxy. It goes around the Milky Way at a particular speed, and its circumambulation of the black hole takes so many million years and so on. So everything mathematically apparently has been calculated. So why is this all happening? Yeah, so this is what Yama is wanting to ask. Why is this all happening? And then I think, if you may remember, in the very first class, when we decided around the COVID pandemic, let us do some kind of philosophical discussions, and that's how we started. And in that very first class of the Hindu Knowledge Academy, we were speaking about creation. And there was this very famous sutra by Veda that gives the final answer to all this. And that sutra is called Rachana Anupapattescha Na Anumanam. Okay, so what Veda says is, insentient objects are not capable of self-initiated action. Okay, so that is the dictum. That is the rule that Veda has given us in his Vedanta Sutra, that insentient objects cannot do anything. They are not capable of self-initiated action. It's a very important concept that we should never forget. Ability for self-initiated, designed and planned action, insentient objects are not capable. And that is the argument around which Veda bases how this Big Bang happened, that something intelligence was there that made the Big Bang happen, and then the whole concept of Brahman as the creator of the universe, Janmadhyasya Yataha, as you know that sutra. So that is what you need to be thinking, that perhaps maybe this is all happening in the universe because there is an underlying force that is using certain laws as per its will and getting certain things done in the universe. And that is exactly what we learned in the previous verse, Havishmadbihi Manushyebihi Agnihi. And when we understood Agni, Agre Nayati, prime mover of all, Agam Nayati, activator of all, or else they remain inert. So these are all the ideas that Agni tells you, and he illustrates this, Yama illustrates this with this idea of, look at the sun, it moves because there is an Agni there, there is an Narayana there is something that is moving all this, everything in the universe. Okay, so that is the very superficial view of looking at this. But from a Vedic philosophy perspective, of course, you go deeper into Adideva and Adi Atma kind of interpretation. What I've given is an Adibhuta interpretation of this. So when you look at the Adideva interpretation, we are talking about Surya Devata. Okay, so the Surya Devata, who is the deity of the sun, that is worshipped by all of us. So that deity is called Surya Devata, right? So I've got a quiz here. Who is Yama's father and what is his rank in Vedic pantheon? So who wants to take up this question? Who is Yama's dad?
Yama's rank is 12th. 12th rank is Yama's.
Thank you, Pratibhaji. Who is Yama's dad?
Yama's dad is Surya.
Very good, Padmajaji. Yeah, correct. So Yama's dad is actually Surya. Surya's son is Yama. So Yama then says, I've told you about Agni, but let me take my own dad as an example. And he talks about Surya Devata. Okay, and as Pratibhaji rightly mentioned, he is the 12th rank in the Vedic pantheon. So Pratibhaji, who else is in the 12th rank? Which other famous deity that again we see every day in our life? He is also 12th rank. Who is that? Chandra. Chandra is also 12th rank. Yeah, so this is just an interesting fact. But Yama, Surya, and Chandra, all of them are based at the same rank, 12th rank. But Surya is slightly higher within the rank because he is Yama's dad. Yeah, because he's the dad, he's a senior, he is slightly higher within the 12th group. Okay, so he says, so yes, possibly the sun is moving and it's revolving and it is going around, probably because of the Surya Devata. Is that the reason why this is happening? That is from an Adi Deva interpretation. But of course, our Yama wants you to ask a much more fundamental question, as I said from the previous slide. Even the Surya Devata, he's also a soul like you and me, and he's got an Antaryamin in himself. And the philosophy there is, it is the Surya's Antaryamin, who is called the Surya Narayana, who is actually making this happen. So think about this. When you look at this verse, Yatashta udeti suryaha astam yatra cha gacchati. Why is this happening? Yama is telling Nachiketa, it's happening not just because of the Surya Devata, because he is also operating under the control of the Surya Narayana, who is inside him as his Antaryam. In fact, the 15th chapter, 12th verse. So who wants to take up this verse for recitation today? Yes, Pragnesh, go for it.
Thank you very much. Yadaditya gatam tejo jagat bhasayate khilam yat chandramasi yachagno tat tejo vidhi mamakam.
Beautiful. So in the 15th chapter, 12th verse, Krishna reminds us, look, mate, I am the one who's doing it. In Agni, the heat and the light, everything of the Agni is me. Yet Aditya Gatam Tejo Jagat Bhasayate Akilam. Even the Surya, his light, and the very fact that he is there moving around, everything is because of me. Okay. Even Krishna has also told us that in the 15:12. Thank you, Pragneshji, very beautifully recited. So yeah, so Surya Devata, then you become Surya's Antaryamin, which is Surya Narayana. And this exactly is the worship of Gayatri Mantra. And we have spent 3 or 4 sessions talking about Gayatri Mantra. So again, when Yama is talking about this, we need to do a revision and also remind ourselves of what did Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita and what does Gayatri Mantra of Rig Veda said. So who wants to recite the Gayatri Mantra for us today? Okay, Pragnesh, again, go for it.
Thank you. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tassavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat.
Okay, so this Gayatri Mantra, of course, we know Gayatri is Brahman himself of Chandogya Upanishad. Yeah. So some people consider Gayatri as another Devata, but that is not what the Vedic view is. The Vedic view of who Gayatri is has been established in the Chandogya Upanishad and also by Veda Vyasa. So primarily Gayatri in the Strilinga, this is a Strilinga, it's a feminine gender. So that Gayatri of the Rig Veda is the Surya Narayana himself. So even that is celebrated famously in the Gayatri Mantra. So that is what Yama is asking. So look at all these things that you see every day. It is all because of the Surya Narayana, who is an Antaryamin. So when you look at from a slightly different perspective, and again, we have done Purusha Shukta, right? And again, this is why it all becomes very interesting when you study Upanishads, because I think we have covered a lot of ground on the basics. Gita, Purusha Shukta, Gayatri. And when you put everything together, it all fits very beautifully. So look at Purusha Shukta. There is a verse in Purusha Shukta, Chakshor Suryo Ajayata. This sun, the Surya, the material sun, and at the same time, the Devata who looks after the Surya, he comes from the eyes of Brahman, Chakshor Suryo Ajayata. So when you look at that from a Rigvedic, in a higher perspective of Purusha Shukta, then this verse opens up slightly different. When I say Yadashcha Udeti Suryaha means during creation, this Surya comes from the eyes of Paramatma. Okay. And then Astam Yatra Cha Gacchati. So when this Pralaya happens, that is what is called Astam Yatra Cha Gacchati. So what happens during Pralaya? There is something called Laya and Apyaya, 2 terms used in philosophy. when the pralaya happens, everything happens in reverse and everything merges into another one. So ultimately what happens is this Surya, who is an aproksha jnani, at the end of pralaya, he attains liberation. And when he attains liberation, he will go and join this Brahman through his eyes. So that is called Sayujya Moksha Sthiti, that he is actually within the body of Brahman, Sayujya. So Surya goes inside him. So that is another explanation, another way of looking at this verse. Yatashcha Udeti Suryaha Astam Yatra Cha Gacchati. From whom? Chakshor Suryo Ajayata, from the Purushottama, or the Purusha, who is celebrated in the Purusha Shukta. So again, when you look at the birth and death of stars, as to how stars come about and how stars merge, even that is very interesting, because when you look at how our Vedic philosophers look at it, stars comes from an explosion, from the Big Bang, and the stars are formed. And when the stars die, when the fuel is gone, and when they die, they eventually merge with another star, and we see all these amazing figures that are shown in NASA's website. And eventually the idea there is a big crunch and everything merges into everything else. And finally the Big Bang becomes a big crunch is one view, as you know, of the cyclical universe. So again, this is what this happens. Chakshor Suryo Ajayata, and the same Surya eventually merges back into the Brahman. Okay. So Yatashta Udeti Suryaha Astam Yatra Gacchati. Tam devaha sarve arpitaha. So it is not only the Surya Devata. So Yama says in the first line, look, I've taken my dad as an example, but I'm also going to say it is not just me, it is all other Devatas. Tam devaha, look at devaha is in plural there. Tam devaha sarve, all devas, Indra, Varuna, etc. And you know, some people say there are 33 crores Devatas in the Vedic pantheon, in the Vedic system, and some say there are 9 crore Devatas. Whatever it is a big number of the various Devatas who have portfolios in the Brahmanda and also portfolios in Pindanda. So he says all these, they all work under the influence of the Supreme, and they all work under the guidance of the Supreme. And these Devatas are always worshipping the Supreme. Yeah. Tam devaha sarvaha arpitaha. And then Krishna again, and again Yama says, nobody can surpass that thing. Tad tat u na atyeti kashchana. So nobody can surpass this Supreme Brahman, whom I have told here as Surya Narayana. He is this God, Brahman, Vishnu, Surya Narayana, whatever. Tadu na atyeti kashchana. Nobody is beyond him. And that again, at this point, I would remind you, please think about the chapter 15, verse 16 to verse 18, which is again a summary of this. So every time you look at Tadunatyeti Kashchana, chapter 15, verse 16 to 18 is what should come to our mind. And then Yama says, Yetadvai tat. So that one that is in the Surya Narayana is the same one inside you as your Antaryamin, as your Paramatma. Yetad vai tat. So here he has taken the example. So he has taken the example of Agni and talked about Agni Narayana. Then he takes the example of Surya and talks about Surya Narayana. Then he takes examples of all the Devatas and says inside all the Devatas is the Antaryami who controls everything. Yeah, and nobody is superior to him. Yeah. So when he has said all this, then he is now going to talk to us. The rest of the class, I want to spend time discussing some very interesting and important concepts for us that we have to firmly fix in our mind. What do we mean when we say Brahman? What do we mean Paramatma? What do we mean by Bhagavan? What are the Vyuha forms? What are the Avatara forms? What are the Amshas? What are the Aveshas? What are the Vibhutis? And all those terms would be very familiar to all of us. But what is the view there? Are these guys different? Is the Brahman different from Amsha form? Is Brahman different from Avatara form? Is Bhagavan different from Avatara form? Are they different? Same. So there is all these confusions that can happen to us. So what Yama has done is, he has done a great service of actually clarifying this over the next several verses, that he is clarifying this for us. Okay. So these verses are very, very important from from a Vedic philosophical perspective, what Yama has said. So I'll just read this mantra and we'll think about it a bit more. So when he has said etad vai tat so many times, so we may have a question, this etad, which is the antaryamin, is there any difference between this etat and this tat that is there in moksha sthiti, this Paramatma who is there in moksha sthiti? Are there any differences in these forms that are described in the scriptures? Yeah. So before we go into the mantra, I've just put a question there for us to have a background information as to what do we think within this group, that do we think there are differences in these forms described in the scriptures? So who wants to take up that?
Suresh ji wants to say something.
Yeah, go for it.
No differences, Mother. I mean, there are no differences in any forms of Vishnu, I mean, the Brahman, so to say.
Thank you, Suresh ji. What about Pragnesh? You raised your hands.
Yeah, I thought one is potential and one is all potentials manifested.
So which is potential, which is all potentials manifested?
Etat is potential and tat is manifested.
Okay, so interesting. Anybody else has a different view here?
Sorry, I didn't understand what that meant.
Pragnesh, over to you. There is a rebuttal. There is not a challenge, but a question that's been...
Sure. No, this is what I enjoy. So we say all souls are potentially divine, or Aham Brahmasmi Atma Su Paramatma. So the soul that is in me is potentially divine. So in this body form it is not, but when we leave the body form, then it merges and becomes almost part of the Brahman.
Okay, interesting. Right. Deval, I hope that clarified your question. So let's look at this. Let's look at this. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very impartial view, because I'm not going to put my ideas in or any other ideas within the group. What we are interested in is what is Katha Upanishad? What does Yama got to say about this? What is Yama's view is important for us, because what is his rank? So who is going to remind us what is Yama's rank? In Vedic Kanti? 12th. Fantastic. Thank you, Suresh, Sushruji. Sure. So what does Yama said here? Yad eva iha tad amutra. Yad amutra tad anviha. Mrityosa mrityum apnoti ya iha naneva pashyati. So, Pragnesh, there is your answer of what Yama is saying in the second line. Mrityoha samrutyum apnoti ya iha naneva pashyati. So what does that mean? Yad eva iha tad amutra. Okay, so let's split it out. I've done it for our benefit. Yad eva iha tad amutra. Yat eva iha. Iha means here. Here means what? So in this samsara, for example, you could take in this world, in this material world, Iha. So there are certain forms of the Supreme that is here, Iha. What are those forms? Avataras. You had so many avatars in all the 4 yugas that's happened. And the same Brahman is also inside you as your Paramatma. So the Iha there means 2 things. Avatara Rupa of Paramatma and the Antaryami Rupa of Paramatma. Okay. Yat eva Iha tad amutra. So whatever form is here in the Avatara Rupa or in your Antaryamin, tat amutra. Amutra means there. Okay. And then what he says is, yat amutra tad anu iha. So whatever that form of Brahman is, in that Tripadasya Amrutandivi, in that Purusha Shukta verse, whatever form of that Brahman is there, amutra means there, as I told you, tad anu iha, that same forms of the Supreme is also here, Avatara Rupa and as is Antaryami. Remember, this section of Katha Upanishad is talking about Brahman and only Brahman. It's not talking about, the material world or the jivas. No, the jivas and the material world are not the topic of discussion by Yama in this topic. So again, Prakarana is very important when you read the Upanishads, and I've seen lots of crazy translations that are out there bringing irrelevant topics for discussion. but here it is only about Brahman. Okay, so Yama is very clearly saying that whatever is here, Avatara and Antaryaman, is the same thing that is there, and whatever is there is the same thing that is here. So in these two different ways, he's trying to impress upon the fact that it is the same Brahman who is there everywhere in different forms, because he has infinite forms. So what are all the things that we think about when we talk about Brahman? And we are all very familiar with this: Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So I've got a slide coming up to clarify what is this Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and what is our view and how should we approach this. Then you have the Vyuha forms. So who is going to tell us what are the Vyuha forms of Paramatma?
Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Sankarshana, Vasudeva, and Narayana.
Excellent. Thank you. So Narayana is the Mula Rupa, and the four Vyuha forms are what you have very beautifully said. Those are the Vyuha forms. Then avatars, of course, there are so many avatars that are described in the scriptures. Amshas, there are so many Amsha aspects, Binna Amsha, there's so many things that are described. Avesha, influence of Supreme in various souls, that is described in the scripture. Then Vibhuti, the whole of Gita chapter, who is going to remind us which chapter it is that talks about the Vibhuti Yoga? Is it the 11th chapter that talks about the Vibhuti of the Supreme? And the 12th is the Vishwarupa, right? So it talks about all the Vibhutis in various souls. So the Vibhuti Rupa also. And then, of course, Rig Veda talks, there is a famous verse here about Rig Veda that talks about there is an Antaryami Rupa in infinite souls. And in infinite souls, there are infinite forms of the Supreme. Each soul has a distinct form of the Supreme. Yeah, so that is the Antaryamin. So this is where our teacher Yama is taking us now. So now that I'm talking to you about this Brahman, let's get a practical view of who this Brahman is. How do you contemplate? Any difference in these forms described in the scripture? Yama is saying here, no. And he's going to substantiate that in several other verses. There is no differences at all in this. And in fact, this famous verse in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, so who is going to recite this for us? This Om Purnamadaha. So can I have volunteer to recite this? And this is useful at this point to revise this particular verse from Brihadaranyaka Upanishad.
Madhuji, I can go.
Yeah, Harish.
Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate.
Beautiful, Harish. Thank you. So that Shanti mantra of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad is only talking about this. Purnam adaha, Purnam idam, Purnam adaha, Purnam idam. Purnat Purnam udachyate. From this Purna, Purna comes. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva avashishyate. Eventually they go back and they are all still the same. So that is a fundamental view of this particular mantra of talking about the various forms of the Supreme, and all forms of the Supreme are infinite. Nothing is limited by anything. Everything is infinite from a Supreme's point of view, i.e. Brahman is infinite, Paramatma is infinite, Bhagavan is infinite, Vyuha forms is infinite, Avatara Rupa is infinite, Amsha Rupa is infinite, Avesha Rupa is infinite, Vibhuti Rupa is infinite, and the Antaryamin is infinite. So there are no difference between any of these. They are all identical. Okay. And then Yama says, if you don't think like this, and if you're worshipping and your approach to the worship of the Supreme is different, then you're going to get into problems, mate, is what Yama is telling. So what happens to one who thinks that they are different or slightly different or different come non-different? So there are all these views that exist over there. So this word here, naneva, basically captures these ideas that they are different. All these forms are different, or there are slight differences in these forms, or they're simultaneously different as well as non-different. So if you have any of these views about the Supreme Brahman, then Yama says, Mrityoho samrutyum apnoti ya iha naneva pashyati. Okay. So Mrityoho, so when you are dead, when you shed this gross body, what will happen to you if you worship Brahman like that? So Mrityur apnoti, you will reach the deepest of hells and pits. is what Yama says. These fellows will come to me, and after they come to me, I'll send them to the deepest of hells. Is what Yama is, warning here. So we need to be very careful when we approach the worship of the Supreme, how we worship the Supreme. And Yama says, Yadeva iha tad amutra, yad amutra tad anviha, mrutyo samrutyum apnoti, ya iha naneva pashyati. So I hope that gives us a slightly different orientation as to how we have to approach this. So I got a related slide here, which will be useful for us to think about. So if you look at Purusha Shukta of the Rig Veda, what did we study there? Pado asya vishwabhutani tripadasya amrutandivi. So in that verse, Purusha Shukta, we learned that there is one aspect of Brahman that is there in material creation. When I say pada, there are so many meanings for pada, but here it is an aspect. He is infinite, right? He is not just made of 4 parts. He is infinite, and he is akhanda. He is partless as well. He is infinite and he is partless. So here the pada means aspect, one aspect in material creation. So there is one aspect of him in material creation, and then the Purusha Sukta says there are 3 aspects in the non-material abodes. So divi there means muktasthana. Muktasthana means moksha. That is the trans-empirical plane. So here 3 aspects he says. Okay, one aspect in the material creation. So in the material creation, we can contemplate on Brahman in 3 ways. Okay, you can look at him as Bhagavan, you can look at him as Brahman, or you can look at him as Paramatma. So when you look at this, so let us take our own body. We are interested only in our body, right? Our body is what? We have a jiva, we are the jiva, there is an antaryamin, and then we have a material body. So this Brahman may pervades all aspects of your material body as well. And at the same time, he is inside sitting you as your antaryamin. And in the whole of the material creation, he's sitting there as when he is there, he's all pervasive. We know that he's omnipresent. And that idea of omnipresence we can get from the word Brahman, which of course means so many other things. Brihantohi asmin gunaha is all pervasive in time, space, and attributes. So when you look at all pervasive in space, for example, in whole of material creation, he is pervaded that. And in Taittiriya Upanishad, we know that verse, right? Tat srishtva tadeva anupravishat. Whatever he creates, he pervades. So that pervaded aspect, we just call this as Brahman. And then there is, of course, there is one other form called Bhagavan, and this is quite popular, and we call lots of avataras as Bhagavan. Yeah. So this is the personal aspect that is available in the avatara forms of the Supreme, for example. So that happens in the Mrityu. In this samsara itself, these aspects are there, and we worship Brahman in all these 3 aspects, Bhagavan, Brahman, or Paramatma. Now the next question is, what happens in the moksha sthiti? Tripadasya amrutandivi. So in the moksha sthiti, 3 aspects. Yeah. So in fact, Muktasthana is very interesting if you study in Vedic philosophy. And this Tripadasya amrutandivi could mean Paramavyoma, Vaikuntha, and Moksha. So these are the 3 layers of moksha sthiti that is discussed in the Vedic philosophy. And in each place of moksha sthiti, jivas can be in 4 different places: Salokya, Samipya, Sarupya, and Sayujya forms. So anybody wants to remind us what are these 3 states of jivas in these 4 areas? Who wants to take that one? What is Salokya, what is Samipya, and what is Sarupya, and what is Sayujya? Okay, yeah.
I think Salokya means that you are in the same place. So like we are in Nottingham. Samipya means we are like close to each other on the same road.
Yes.
Sarupya means we are probably in the same house. And Sayujya means you are merged with the Bhagavanta, and that is only available to Devatas.
Yeah, brilliant, Sushrut. The Sarupya there is, you got everything right. Sarupya is similar. You dress up similarly. You got a similar kind of appearance to the Brahman. So in all these 3 areas, jivas can be in 4 different stations. But don't forget, even in the moksha sthiti, our Vedic philosophy says that this Paramatman is still your antaryamin there. This antaryaman is not got out of you. Even in moksha sthiti, your linga sharira may be shed, but you still have the antaryaman there. So the paramatma aspect of Brahman is still there in the moksha sthiti. Okay, and then it is also described in the Vedas that the trans-empirical plane is much more bigger than the material plane. So that is in fact described as infinite. It is so infinite, the trans-empirical plane. But even there, Brahman has pervaded all of the trans-empirical plane. If that is infinite trans-empirical space, I wouldn't say space, trans-empirical plane, Brahman has still pervaded in all aspects of all existence. There is no place where he does not exist. So that aspect of Brahman is also there in moksha sthiti as an all-pervaded thing. And we also know that this Brahman also exists in this Bhagavan, or personal form also is described in the Vedas. Say, for example, in moksha sthiti, Parama Vyoma, Vaikuntha and Moksha. In other places, they have synonyms. They are called Shvetadipa, Anantasana and Vaikuntha. So in these forms, the scriptures tell us there are three different aspects of the personal forms of Brahman: Amruta, Kshema, Abhaya. Narayana, Padmanabha, Vaikuntha. In Vishnu Sahasranama, Vaikuntha is the name of Narayana. So Vaikuntha, Padmanabha, Narayana. And of course, you can call this Narayana, Padmanabha, Vaikuntha as Krishna, Rama, or whatever. So what I'm trying to tell you here is this Bhagavan, Brahman, Paramatma, these three aspects, these three ways of looking at the Supreme Lord, not only in the material plane, but they also exist in the trans-empirical plane. And when we remind ourselves of this previous verse for Yama, then we realize they are all the same. It is just a different way in which we describe for our contemplation, but he simultaneously all this. And that is what Yama has told to us in the previous verses in Katha Upanishad. Anoraniyan mahato mahiyan, asino duram rajati, shayano yati sarvataha. He is smaller than the smallest, and he is bigger than the biggest, and he is lying down, but he's also moving everywhere. So we understood all that, talking about omnipresence and the omnipotency of God. So again, I want to remind all of us, including those who might have joined us as new friends today, that this Bhagavan, Brahman, Paramatma and all is only for our perspective. But from a God's perspective, he is the same simultaneously everywhere. Yeah. And of course, there is this famous examples of Bhagavan definition that many of you will know this, but perhaps somebody wants to say and share with us what is the definition of Bhagavan, which is quite timely to discuss here. So who wants to take that up? What is the definition of Bhagavan? So that comes in Vishnu Purana. So go back and read about this. Vishnu Purana, Aishwaryasya Samagrasya, Viryasya Yashasaha Shriyaha, Jnana Vairagyayor Chaiva Sannam Bhaga Iting Jnana. Vishnu Purana. Full strength, fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation. 6 opulences that is described. So again, to remind you, some people can get very very intense emotions and intense views about this, that Bhagavan is great, Brahman is small, Paramatma is small, Bhagavan, Brahman is great, Bhagavan is small, Paramatma is small and so on. So what I want you to do is, anybody who thinks like that, Yama is telling them, Mrutyoha samrutyum apnoti ya iha naneva pashyati, because they are all the same. It is from your own perspective as to how you do it. So how do you then contemplate this? So Yama then tells us, don't get into the logics of this. He says, Manasaiva aptavyam neha nanasti kinchana. This is again a very famous, very important mantra of Katha Upanishad. Manasaiva aptavyam neha nanasti kinchana. Mrutyo so mrutyum gacchati ya iha naneva pashyati. So remember, we are talking about Brahman, we are talking about God. There is nothing about matter, there's nothing about the souls. We are talking about Brahman here. So Prakarana is very important. And again, I have seen some funny translations of these mantras. But for us, contextual relevance is important, because for the past 8 months, we've been focused on Katha Upanishad. So what does the mantra is saying? Manasaiva aptavyam. Manasa eva idam aptavyam. So use your manana, your contemplation, use your intuitionary knowledge. See what the rishis who have said in their intuitionary perception of the Supreme. And what have they said? Neha nana asti kinchana. Very, very important verse. And I've seen some folks plucking this out of context and planting some funny philosophies. But for us, this mantra is important. So when you look at the mantra as a whole, what does this mean? Number one, we are talking about Brahman here. We are talking about various rupas. So what does it say? Na, iha, nana, asti, kinchana. Na is easy, no. Iha, Avatara Rupa, Bimba Rupa, and all other Rupas. Nana, no taint of difference. Yeah, there is no taint of difference, or difference come non-difference. There is no difference at all in any of these aspects, in their forms, attributes, and actions. Kinchana, not even the slightest taint of difference exist in the various forms. So Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, Varaha, you contemplate whatever way you want, but they are all the same. Okay. Rama, some people say he is Maryada Purushottama. Krishna, somebody say he is Purna Purushottama. I don't know why they say all this, but they say this from their own perspective. But from the Brahman's perspective, when Rama's Krishna's perspective, Rama knows that he is not different from Krishna. Yeah, that they are non-different is the key aspect. So this again boils down to our own approach to how we perceive all these avatara rupas. There may be some jiva that has a predisposition. It may be based on its own swabhava. It might like Rama's form and may say Jai Shri Ram and worship. Or there may be another jiva with a particular swabhava which might say Jai Shri Krishna or may say Hare Krishna. Or there may be another jiva with a particular swabhava which might like the form of Narasimha and might even worship the nails of Narasimha. There is a Narasimha Nakastuti, as you know. And there may be some souls that like Varaha Rupa of the Supreme and may worship the Varaha Rupa of the Supreme. So these forms of worship is only based on our own intrinsic natures. Yeah. But Rama and Krishna are not different, and no one is superior or inferior, because Yama is saying again and again in so many verses here, Mrityosa mrityum gacchati ya iha naneva pashyati. If we say Krishna is bigger than Rama and worship like that, this is your situation. Mrityosa mrityum gacchati ya iha naneva pashyati. Or you say Rama is superior to Krishna or any other names, again you go into the same situation. Okay, so this is an important, reminder for us as to how we should be looking at this problem. In fact, when we were doing Mandukya Upanishad, I just wanted to bring this Vedanta Sutra here. When we were doing Mandukya Upanishad of all the Vaishwanara of Vishwa, Tejasa, and Prajna form of the Supreme, there was a question about, are there any differences between the Vishwa, Tejasa, and Prajna form of the Supreme? To address that question, Veda Vyasa did a sutra called Nastanatopi Parasya Ubayalingam Sarvatrahi. And he establishes there is no difference in even these three forms that control three states of consciousness of the jivas. So then the other question that comes here is, how is this all possible? That Brahman simultaneously looks like Rama, Krishna, and in Rama avatar, he had a bow and he did lots of things. Whereas in Krishna avatar, he had chakra and did a lot of other things. Are their actions also different? Our Shastra says even their actions are not different because they are just Jnanananda Swarupa, they are doing things. We are perceiving it differently, but for him, they are all the same. How is this possible? And we have discussed quite a lot about Achintya Shakti. Yeah, Achintya Shakti Vicharaha. Yeah, this Achintya Adbhuta Shakti of the Supreme, the incomprehensible potency of the Lord, that you and me with limited intelligence, we just cannot understand it. So this is the idea of the Achintya Adbhuta Shakti of the Supreme that makes us, that he does that way, but we are not able to perceive his supreme potency. So again in this verse, Yama says, Manasaiva aptavyam na iha nana asti kinchana. Don't even think about that there is a difference between the Supreme Brahman, his avatara rupas, the Bhagavan, the Paramatma, the Antaryamin. No, Rama, Krishna, Vara, whatever, there is absolutely no difference is what Yama is saying. And as soon as he says, Once you understand, once you have this clear view of this Brahman, then the question is, how does one contemplate, or the one who has the right knowledge and one who understands this is the nature of Brahman, how does he perceive, how does he meditate, how does he do Shravana, Manana, and Dhyana of Brahman? So here Dhyana becomes important. So when he does Dhyana, how does he look at and approach that Brahman? So Yama puts a very, very beautiful verse here. Angushta matraha purusho madhye atmani tishtati ishanam bhutabhavyasya natato vijugupsate etadvaitat. So when this fellow who has understood Brahman properly and does dhyana, how does he meditate? He meditates that Brahman is angushta matra, that is about the size of your thumb. This Purusha is Angushta Matraha, and where is he? Madhye Atmani Tishtati. Atmani means your body. Madhye means middle portion of the body. He worships in deep contemplation. He thinks about this Brahman who is in the middle part of the body as somebody who is of the form, who is of the size of the thumb. Okay, so this is interesting idea. Angushta matra purushaha madhye atmani tishtati. Because so far we knew that this Brahman can be atomic as an antaryamin within souls. And this Brahman can be all pervasive and he's everywhere in the universe. Now here our Yama says, the fellows who do meditation think about him of the size of the thumb in the middle portion of the heart. So many of these acharyas have had a lot of discussions about this. And our Veda Vyasa has settled this in 2 sutras. So I've given you the references here to go and understand what it means. He gives 2 sutras here. One is called Shabdadeva Pravitaha. Hridi Apekshaya tu Manushya Adhikaritvat. These are the 2 sutras where he settles this particular mantra of Katha Upanishad, basically implying human form of life is the sadhana sharira. For us, we have a thumb, and for the ones that do meditation, they meditate of the Supreme Brahman as in the middle portion of the heart. And we know about middle portion of the body, and that we know is Hrit. And that we have had endless discussion about where the Jiva is and where the Brahman is. Yeah. And Gita verse 13 and 15, they talk about this. So perhaps let's pick up Gita 15:15. So who wants to recite the 15:15 verse that reminds us as to where this Brahman is?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Veena just going to do it. Yeah. Shall I go?
Yeah, go for it, Veenaji.
Sarvasya chaham hrudi sannivishtaha muktasmriti jnanamapohanam cha vedaischa sarvairahameva vedyaha vedanta krudveda videva chaha.
Beautiful, Veenaji. Thank you very much. Sarvasya aham hridi sannivishtaha. So he is there in the middle portion. We know hridi means middle portion of your body. Yeah. So that middle portion, he says, Angushta Matraha Purusha, the fellows who meditate upon Brahman in the right perspective, they meditate upon him as somebody who is in the middle portion of the heart. Yeah. And who is this person? Besides all the other things I've told so far, he will also worship him as Ishanam Bhutabhavyasa Natato Vijigupsate Etadvaitat. And we are familiar with this verse that Ishanam, he is the controller of the muktas, he is the highest liberated. He is not only your controller in the past, but also in the future. And when he is as your antaryamin, and you know that he is controlling and protecting you, and such a person who has that view will not be scared of protecting him. He will not actually protect himself, such as buy a house, lock his house, and then sit inside. Natato vijigupsate, in the sense that he becomes fearless. So that one that is there inside your heart, etat vai tat. Okay, so he says that, and then immediately he puts another very beautiful mantra there, and again he talks about this Angushta Matra Purushaha inside you, because our Pindanda is important for us, right? We are all people who can, we should develop the ability to actually go inside and look at our own Antaryamin and talk about the Dhyana there. And that is what Yama is telling us here in this verse. He says, Angushta Matraha Purushaha Jyoti Riva Adhumakaha Ishano Bhutavavyasya Eva Adyaha Savushvaha Etadvaitat. So this is interesting. There is a new twist here. Ishano Bhutavavyasya. And there is, he has put in 2 new words. Sa eva adyaha savu shvaha. So let's look at what this means. So this Angushta Matra who is inside you, he describes this person as Jyotir Iva Adhumakaha. So Jyoti means light. So I've just given an example of a candle. There are two candles here. One candle is just a pure light, and another candle, there is also some smoke that is coming out of this candle. Okay. So here Yama says Jyotir Iva Adhumakaha. You look at the Sandhi very carefully. Jyotir Iva Adhumakaha. Dhuma means smoke. But he says this Angushta Matra Purusha is a Jyoti, he is a light. The fellows who meditate will see him as a light in their heart. And that light is Adhumakaha, means it has no smoke, which means it has no defects. And which means it is full of infinite auspicious attributes and it has no defects at all. In contrast to Jyoti Riva Dhumakaha, which is here, which the smoke signifying defects. So you will look at this Brahman as somebody who is without defects, and the opposite of it is full of auspicious attributes. So that's what Acharya does in various places to bring about these kind of ideas. When he says Jyotiriva Dhumakaha, Acharya in his Sutra Bhashya will say Narayanam Gunaihi Sarvair Udirnam Doshavarjitam. No defects. Neyam Gamyam Gurushtapi Natva Sutrartha Uchyate. Devam Narayanam Satva Sarva Dosha Vivarjitam. No defects. Sarva Dosha Vivarjitam. Paripurnam. Full of auspicious attributes. Gurum Shtapi Gitartam Vakshami Leshataha. Okay. So when you look at this verse, Jyotiriva Adhumakaha, you get all these ideas about he's somebody who is pure. And this guy is your Ishanam, he is your controller, Bhuta Bhavyasya, Bhuta and Bhavya. Now this is interesting. Sa eva adyaha sa vu shvaha. I put a reminders here. I forgot to put the verses there. So adyaha means today, and savu shvaha means tomorrow. Yeah. So adyaha and shvaha. Okay. Adyaha means today. Today means what? For you and me who are in samsara, which is today, he is inside you as a Jyoti Riva Adhumakaha. And Shvaha is tomorrow. Tomorrow is what? When we have had our moksha and we are in the moksha sthiti, the same fellow is still there. The same Brahman is there. As your Antaryamin, Jyoti Riva Adhumakaha. And he finishes off saying, Yetadvai Tat. It is the same person. So Angushta Matraha Purusho Jyotiriva Adhumakaha Ishano Bhutabhavyasya Sa eva adyaha savushvaha yetadvai tat. Okay, so I think we are lucky. I think we are finishing today the Valli. So then he says, but the person who actually worships the Supreme is different. Who worships him, that this Brahman is different, Paramatma is different, Bhagavan is different, God and his attributes are different, or God has no attributes, he is a useless zero, or he has only limited attributes, or his attributes is different from his person. The people who look at all this, Yama has a view there. It is not my view or any Acharya's view, it is Yama's view. What is Yama saying here? This is a beautiful, again a metaphor. He says, Yad udakam durge vrishtam parvateshu vidavati yevam dharman prutak pashyan staneva anuvidavati. So what does that mean? Parvateshu durge. Parvata means we know is a mountain. Durge means the peak of this mountain which nobody can climb. So if there is rainfall here and the rain falls on this Durga, what happens? The water flows, and we have seen in the Himalayas cloud burst and waters flowing everywhere and causing all sorts of damage. So similarly, when you have the clouds, there is heavy rain, the water flows. How does it flows? Parvateshu durge yat udakam vrishtam. Udaka means water. We all know that. Vrishtam means flows very fastly. It just flows very fastly. How? Vidavati. Vidavati means it is flowing in various directions. Viruddham, it is flowing in the opposite direction. Viparitam, it is flowing very, very bizarrely. Vividham, it is flowing in various directions where it is flowing down to the bottom. Yeah. So this is a very, very interesting example where he says, he who thinks that Brahman has got no qualities or got fewer qualities, or his qualities is different from his person, that fellow, or who thinks the various rupas are different, that fellow, like how a river, the water falls down very fast, like that, that fellow is going to fall down very fast. Evam dharman pritak pashyan. Pritak means different. Pashyan means sees or knows. Evam dharman. Dharman, you can say dharma is the supreme, dharman or the attributes. And if he sees everything as different, Taneva anuvidavati, even that soul will fall down. Anuvidavati, vidavati is the same meaning here, falls down miserably in various directions to the deepest of the hells, which our Shastras talk about, andasamas. Okay, so this is a very important verse that Yama tells that how we need to worship the Supreme. If you have a different perspective and become a very sentimental person, or just gets moved by some folks, you will get into this problem. So that's why watch out for this. That's Yama is telling us. Yata udakam durge vrishtam parvateshu vidavati evam dharman pratak pashyan taneva anuvidavati. So I want, if you can bear with me, we got another 10-15 minutes, and I really want to finish today the Valli because we have covered quite a few ideas today. So the key point is why all this, so many discussions about attributes, the various forms and so on. So you might ask, is this a sentimental view? Is this just a fanatical sentimental view that practitioners of the Sanatana Dharma have? Or there is actually a rationale behind such a concept of understanding Brahman as a complete whole, where the gunas and the rupas and the actions, the icha, jnana, kriya, the rupa, everything is the same. For Brahman, there is no difference. How do you kind of square this circle? So I want to finish the next 10 minutes with a few discussions, and then we'll close today's sessions. So that really takes us to a very fundamental problem called substance. Dravyas, all the substances that are there in all of existence. Yeah, there are some substances that are eternal, and there are some substances that are non-eternal. So there is a quiz that's come up here. Some of the clues are already here. So I put everything in existence. There is this Brahman or God. Then there is matter. Then there is this jivas. Then there is the Chetana Prakriti. Jivas start from Chaturmukha Brahma all the way down. Matter is all these Mahat Ahankara, Tejas, Panchatanmatra, Panchabhuta, everything. Then we know Chetana Prakriti as Lakshmi, Durga. Yeah. So now here, what are all eternal and what are non-eternal? So I put the question for our own discussion. What are the eternal substances in Vedic philosophy? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, dravyam karma cha kalascha swabhavo jiva eva cha. Those are the so
list us for all of our. So a great verse, Neetaji. So list the eternal substances. What are all the substances from? So you have taken from Bhagavatam 2, 10, 12. Yes.
Yeah.
So
dravyam is primordial matter.
That is Mula
karmas.
Prakriti. Yeah.
Yeah, karmas that we all know as karma. Kala, time.
Yeah.
Jiva.
Yeah.
Swabhava.
Yeah.
That's
and Bhagavanta.
And Bhagavanta, of course.
Yeah.
So always there.
Yeah. So those are all eternal substances of Vedic philosophy. Great answer, Neetaji, from 2, 10, 12 in Bhagavatam. So that gives a summary of all the eternal substances. So this is where the problem is, the eternal substances. So the next question is, all substances, material and non-material, have attributes. Okay. Anybody who says that non-material substances don't have attributes, they have to qualify. Yes, they don't have attributes they don't have material attributes. So non-material substances do not have material attributes, but non-material substances have non-material attributes. Material substances have material attributes. So that is all substances. God is also a substance, okay, in Vedic philosophies. God, Jiva, and all others that Neetaji has mentioned. So they all have attributes. Substances have attributes. This is the problem, and this is a core philosophical issue both in the East and the West, and great philosophers have dwelt with this problem. So all substances have attributes. So then there is a whole lot of discussion about if all substances have an attribute, what is the relationship between the substance and their attributes? Okay, this is hardcore philosophy. Let's not spend too much time on this. You can do your homework. So there are only 4 possibilities here. Either they are identical, substance and attributes are identical. So this is a view in Advaita and also in the Western philosophy, particularly Spinoza's philosophy, which is also nihilistic philosophy, monistic philosophy, nihilistic philosophy, they're all the same. So Spinoza's philosophy, substance and attributes are the same. In Nyaya Vaisheshika schools, they think that substance and attributes are different. And these two are linked by something called Samavaya. Okay, do your homework. Then there are this Bhatta school of philosophy. They think they're partly identical, partly different. So basically neither here nor we don't have a comprehensive view, but it's a compromise view. So that is also is one view. Then there is the other thing called self-differentiating capacity of substance themselves through something called Viseshas. Okay, so this is the realistic school of Vedantas. They say that there is nothing called attribute. A substance is a substance and its attributes are the substance, but they come to our perception in different forms due to the self-differentiating capacity of the substances themselves through a concept called Viseshas. So this is very similar to the more recent philosophy called Hegelian doctrine of internal relations. So these are all tough philosophical questions, but I've just put it here so that you can do your homework about substance and attributes. Why am I bringing it here? Because for sentient substances, that is like Jivas and Brahman, they are sentient substances. For the sentient substances, the substance itself is its own attribute. Okay, so there is no difference between this in the sense that the substance somehow shows itself through Viseshas in various aspects to the people who perceive it from outside. So that is called Vishesha Abheda. Okay? So for insentient substances, there are 2 ways. If, for example, insentient substance, the coeval attributes are within the substance, whereas for a mango which is green becomes yellow, the yellow is an external attribute that comes to it as it ripens. So these are all the discussions that happens in philosophy. And I could not put this figure here and make it complicated because we are interested in this Brahman who has got Vyuha forms, who's got Vibhuti forms, he's got Avatara forms, and he's also called Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan, and he's got infinite forms. And of course, he's got Antaryami. So from a philosophical perspective, this Brahman who is a substance, who's got infinite auspicious attributes, which is the core essence of the substance itself. And through its inherent capacity called Viseshas, you see it as different aspects. We see it as different aspects, but he is the same person. So that is what I am trying to get you there, that he is the same person, but we see him differently as Rama or Krishna or whatever other names that other religions have. But as long as we understand in himself he is the same person, then your contemplation of Brahman is in the right direction. Okay, so that is what Yama is telling us. So when you do Shravana, Manana, Dhyana correctly, you will eventually attain Aparoksha Jnana and then Moksha. Yeah, and then he finishes off. Next 10 minutes, I'll finish this off. Then he finishes off and says, so what is our state there? So now we understand when we do Shravana, Manana, Dhyana, and we understand that Jyoti Riva Adhumakaha, that this person is pure, no defects at all. And when I worship this Brahman as somebody who is defectless and with infinite auspicious attributes, there is a famous Shruti mantra called Yam Yata Yata Upasate Tam Tataiva Bhavati. So if you worship Brahman as somebody who is infinite, who is Gunapurna and Doshadura, if you worship him like that, do you also become Brahman or what? Do you also become infinite and become pure and become the same as Brahman or something else? So that is an interesting question. Yama answers this here. Yeah, Yama is not shy of addressing any of these questions for our benefit. So in the very next verse, he says, Yata udakam shuddhe shuddham asiktam tadrigeva bhavati. Yevam vuner vijanataha atma bhavati gautama. This is the last verse of this verse. Beautiful verse. And need to be looked at it in deep philosophical aspects and also hardcore scientific aspects. Yata udakam shuddhe. Shuddhe means pure. Udakam means water. So yata udakam shuddhe suddham asiktam. So you have two glasses of water. This glass has got pure water. This glass has got pure water. Now you pour this pure water into this pure water. What you get? You get a glass which still got pure water. So now are we saying that this glass of water, which is the Jiva, has gone into Brahman, then it has become Brahman itself, or it is somebody else? Okay. Does the Jiva still retain its identity? That is what Yama is clarifying with this simple, very, very simple analogy, which unfortunately has been viewed differently. But let's look at this problem. What does this glass of water got? It's got water molecules. And I've just put 4 red dots here, water molecules. Let us take another glass of water with water molecules, for example. And when you add these together, you get 8 water molecules. Yeah. 4 water molecules plus 4 water molecules is 8 water molecules. The water molecules do not become one. Okay. Fundamental properties of physics, which some schools of philosophy has forgotten by taking this example. Because again, Yama says, Tadrigeva. Tadrigeva is an important word. Tadrigeva is not identity. Tadrigeva is they become similar. That you cannot distinguish these water molecules from outside, but the distinction is there, but it appears as though it is still the same pure water that is there. But note, the level of the water in the glass has gone up. So that should give you the clue that the Jivas still maintain their identity in moksha, the Brahman is still there. So that is what Yama is saying. Yata udakam durge suddham, yata udakam shuddhe shuddhamasiktam tadrigeva bhavati. Okay, so here I've given a small quiz. We have done this Upanishad and there is this verse which is exactly the same. Yeah, imaha somya nadyaha purastat prachyaha syandante pashtat pratishchastaha samudrat samudrameva apiyanti. So samudra eva bhavati ta yata tatra na viduhu yamahamasmi iti evameva kalu somya imaha sarvaha prajaha sata agamya na viduhu sata agacchamaha iti taiha vyagro va simho va vruko va varaho va kito va patango va damsho va mashako va yadyad bhavanti tat tada bhavanti saya esha anima aitadatmyam idam sarvam tat satyam sa atma tattvamasi shvetaketo. Okay. These rivers, when they move into the oceans, they merge, they go into the oceans, but still the water molecules of the river are still the same. The water molecules of the oceans are the same. When more and more river falls in, the sea levels actually go up. We know from all the global warming, that's what is happening. That is again an example which is very similar to this. So which Upanishad is this before we close today's session? Which Upanishad, please?
It is Chandogya Upanishad.
Fantastic, Padma Jaji. Chapter 6 of Chandogya Upanishad also talks about this. So, yata udakam shuddhe shuddhamasiktam tadrigeva bhavati yevam muder vijanataha atma bhavati gautama. The person who knows is muner vijanataha atma bhavati gautama. Okay, so we'll come to that and close today's session. So I just want to remind you, so when there is apparent identity that is described in scriptures, it is not absolute identity. It is a figurative identity for our understanding, like the glasses of water, like the rivers into the ocean. Acharya has actually settled this problem in a work called Anivyakyana, where he says, Swatantraye cha vishishtatve sthana matya aikyayerapi sadrushye cha aikyavak samyak savakasha yateshtataha. So when we say we are all one, it can be from various perspectives. We are all one in this matter because we have similar opinion or we are synchronized in your thinking. We are all stuck as one in the sinking ship. We are all one as Indian. We are when we look at a picture, we say it is a lion, but it is only a resemblance. So the Upanishads is full of these kind of metaphors, but they need to be understood carefully using what do the Upanishads themselves say, what is the grammars, what is the Tatparya Lingas, what is the rules of interpretation, what is the Prakarana, etc. And then we understand this. Okay, so a person who understands this, he becomes a Muni. Evam Mune. So I put a question here. Who is a Muni? So we did Mandukya Upanishad, and we have also, doing right in the middle of Katha Upanishad. So a definition of Muni is given in these Upanishads. So who is going to tell us who it is? Who is a Muni for us? Are we all Munis? Because that's what we should be aiming for.
Who does Manana?
Yeah, Pratibhaji first. Go for it.
Whoever does the Manana is the Muni, no?
Fantastic. Manana Shilaha, who contemplates and thinks about a problem. And Nita Shushrut and team?
Muni is someone who's understood Om in its entirety, right?
Wonderful, Sureshji. Thank you very much for reminding us of that mantra in Mandukya Upanishad. We did that. Omkaro vidito yena samuner na itaro janaha samuner na itaro janaha. That's the last verse of Mandukya Upanishad. It finishes with repeating twice. Samuner na itaro janaha. Omkara vidito yena. He who knows this Omkara Tattva properly is the Muni. And what did the Yama said in the very, very first, when we started this contemplation of who this Brahman is a couple of months ago, Yama started off with this verse, Sarve Vedaha yat padamamananti, tapamsi sarvani cha yadvadanti, yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti, tatte padam sangrahena bravimi om ityetat. Okay, so that entity is Brahman is Om. And Mandukya says, he who knows that Om is the Muni, and he who knows that Om in the right perspective is the real Muni. And you know him in the right perspective only when, as Pratibhaji reminded us, as Manana Shilaha. Okay, Vijanataha. When he does that, Vijanataha, he becomes an Aparoksha Jnanin. And then what happens? Atma Bhavati Gautama. He attains his own fullness as per capacity of Swarupa and joins the Supreme. Yeah, he reaches his own fullness. So, for example, Pragnesh ji was mentioning a word called Aham Brahmasmi. So, Pragnesh, go to that Brihadaranyaka Upanishad chapter and read the whole thing as to what is that Aham Brahmasmi that is being discussed at, which is beautiful. Brahmava idamagra asid. And it starts like, and Tadanim. It beautifully goes. It uses Aham Brahmasmi thrice, and it says Rishis, Devatas, and Munis attain their own Aham Brahmasmi, which means their own fullness. I am full in the sense there may be 3 glasses in different sizes. There may be a small glass, there may be a big glass, there may be a huge glass. You may fill it up with water and fill it up fully. So this small glass is also full. The middle glass is also full. The third glass is also full. They are all called full because they have their own capacity to hold the water. Similarly, each jiva, as per its capacity, attains its fullness. Yeah, so that is the real meaning. Maybe we take up that verse at some time. I love that particular verse of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Brahmava idamagra asit, and so on. It's a beautiful verse. So that is what our Yama is saying. Yevam muner vijanataha atma bhavati gautama. I become Atma. Yeah, I become an Atma, not Paramatma. I become an Atma. I means what? I reach my pristine self. And where do they go? I go to 3 places which we discussed. Jivas go to Salokya, Samipya, Sarupya, and Sayujya. So if you take the Anuvakyana equation, we are all one in this matter, thinking and in a synchronized way on the Supreme, always in moksha. We are here as one family of infinite jivas who have been liberated from samsara. We are all one as muktas in moksha. We have a fraction of Satchitananda, and we have a resemblance to the Supreme who is infinite Satchitananda. So when you put these 4 equations and put this equation of Anuvyakyana, Swatantriyecha Vishishtatve Sthana Matya Aikyayorapi Sadrishyecha Aikyavat Samyak Savakasha Yateshtataha, the equation is complete, and that tallies exactly with what Yama has said. Yata udakam suddhe suddhamasittam tadrigeva bhavati Evam muner vijanataha atma bhavati gautama. And then he finishes off this particular Valli, and I'm very pleased we finished today's Valli. Iti Katha Upanishad Dvitiya Adhyayaha Pratama Vallihi. Krishna Pranamastu. And I hope you were able to grasp a few ideas today about what is this concept of Brahman that Yama is teaching us. Your idea, my idea, practitioners of others of various schools of Vedantas, their ideas actually does not matter. For us, Veda is an Apaurushaya scripture. It is a source of supreme authority. What is that Apaurushaya scripture telling us? Katha Upanishad is part of the Krishna Yajur Veda. And this is the message of Yama through Nachiketa to us, that when you contemplate on Brahman, do it in the right perspective. If you are swayed and you think anything goes, Yama is warning us that you run a very, very, very difficult path. Previously, remember, he said those who follow the path of spirituality are walking on a razor's edge. We have done that verse before. And this is why he has said that it is a razor's edge of having the right perspective is absolutely important. Everything goes is not what Yama is teaching us. He's telling us, Tam evam vidwan amrutayiha bhavati. That's what Rig Veda has said, Purusha Shukta. He who knows the Supreme in this particular way only will attain moksha. Tam evam vidwan amrutayiha bhavati. And that is exactly what Yama has said, Atma bhavati. Yeah. So on that note, Krishna Pranamastu, and thank you very much for listening. We can take up any questions if you have. Oh, there is one point that's come in chat. Let's have a look. No, that's fine. Thank you, Pragnesh. So I presume we have no questions. I'm sorry, I was 10 minutes straight over. That's probably because I wanted to finish today, and then we start a new Valli from next week, which is even beautiful. New Valli talks about the 11 gates of the human body. Okay, Krishna has said about the 9 gates of the human body, and here Yama starts. The sadhana sharira has 11 gates, and then he starts the second Valli, which is quite fascinating. Again, as usual, or any philosophy of Yama is great. Yeah, so we will do that in a fortnight's time. So next week we have another interesting session led by Suresh Kankanwadi and team. As you know, 3 or 4 weeks ago we did chapter 13 part A, and Suresh is going to complete chapter 13 part B with some very key and important verses from the Gita. So I hope we will see you all there next Sunday. And if there are no questions, we'll close today's session. Harish, do you want to take us through Om, please?
Hello. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, please. Yeah. So identify yourself and ask a question.
No, this is the first time I am hearing to your lecture.
Yeah, Vaniji,
Okay.
hello. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
See, sir, ekam sat vipraha bahudha vadanti. That means sat is only one and the only one. Different vipras means panditas. Bahudha vadanti. Is my understanding correct, sir?
Yeah, absolutely, Vaniji. Yeah, very well put. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vatanti from Shvetashvatara Upanishad. That gives you like, there is only one Brahman, one Sat. You can call him as Brahman, you can call him as Paramatma, you can call him as Bhagavan, you can call him as Krishna, Rama, or whatever other names. He is only one, because he's got infinite names. And any name, in fact, our Acharya has put something called Sarva Shabda Vachyatva. Any name, anything in the universe only denotes him. So if you take that perspective, there is no confusion at all. It is only confusion on our side that sometimes we have our own internal quarrels and we fight among each other for some difference of opinions, but that's our own ignorance. But as you rightly pointed out, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Yeah, thank you, Vaniji.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Okay, excellent. So will Harish, yeah, let's do the Omkara. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. See you next Sunday.
Guru Bhyo Namo. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhu.